Stop sleeping on Kenna Bridge of Spirits. Yeah, don't try to act like you weren't. You're just like the rest of them, aren't you? The ones who watch the trailers and say, oh, this game looks pretty cool, I might pick it up. But in reality, had no intention of opening the PlayStation or Epic store, putting in your credit card number, and actually buying the game. You know, it's liars like you that make it so that it's impossible for anyone to take anything anyone else says seriously. Yeah, no, I'm not actually mad. Sorry about that. Just the internet, you know? What's going on, dudes and dudettes? It's your boy Innocence, and I got a pretty interesting one for you today about a game you've probably already heard of, but know nothing about. Of course, I'm talking about Kenna Bridge of Spirits. Now, here's the funny thing about this game. It really seems like it's one of those titles that everyone is excited for. Take to Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, what have you, and there are tons of comments of people saying that they'd get the game, and a bunch of creators saying that it looks good. But, yeah, I think they're lying. Now, hear me out. I'm not saying anyone is lying in the most serious sense, but more so leaning into the fact that everyone seems to like the game, yet no one is talking about it. I mean, seriously, there is absolutely no reason I should be able to type in Kenna Bridge of Spirits into the YouTube search bar and have what seems to be 17 different videos of either reaction content, official trailers, or official trailer re-uploads from smaller channels looking to swindle some unsuspecting kids into subscribing to them. I mean, for crying out loud, all we got was a logo. A singular logo, not even a title for God of War 5, but when you type in God of War Ragnarok into the search engine, you're flooded with tons of videos uploaded 5 seconds ago about leaks, rumors, news, things you didn't know, graphics engine details, predictions, comedy skits, and people claiming they have inside sources even though they most definitely don't. And I get it, Kenna is not God of War. God of War, fantastic franchise, and God of War 4 will go down as one of the best games in gaming history. So of course the next installment is going to get a lot of heat on YouTube. I mean, even myself, a couple days ago I uploaded a video titled Deciphering God of War Ragnarok because I'm excited about the game too. And also feel free to watch it, I think it's a pretty good one. But what doesn't make sense to me is how there's so many people saying that they're into Kenna, but we're kind of starved for conversations about it on the internet. I mean, at the time of making this video, the official Kenna Bridge of Spirits subreddit has 1,100 members. Looks like I gotta bust out the calculator because something's not adding up. While it's absolutely mind-boggling that this subreddit only has 1,000 members, I guess the biggest point I'm trying to make by saying all this is that the only reason you don't see content about this game is because it's unproven. It's from a small indie developer who has literally never made a game before. Kenna's developer, Ember Lab, has made tons of animations and commercials, but have never dove into the intricacies of game making. So I totally understand that some people just want to sit back and see how things play out until the game hopefully does well and the fear of missing out starts to kick in. So I decided to make this video so you could be an ahead of the curve gamer and show off to all your friends if the game does well, saying that you knew all about it and that they were late to the party. And to hopefully spread some information about the game and get people to potentially look at it a bit more closely, because I honestly think that it should be a very decent experience at worst. So if you are someone who thought this game looked good but wasn't sure if it would be worth your time, this is the video for you. So without any further ado, here is everything you need to know about Kenna Bridge of Spirits. Starting off with the story/lore. I think the story and lore of any game is what makes it so enticing to play. A single player game without any story or any sufficient lore isn't a single player game at all, or at least not a very good one. Because the backbone of any game is the world it's set in, and oftentimes that world has direct implications on how the game will play. Of course, Kenna Bridge of Spirits is no different and has some pretty interesting themes at play. Bridge of Spirits is set in a village tucked away in the woods, and also the region surrounding it. Kenna isn't necessarily from this village, but she journeys to it to fulfill her role as a spirit guide. You see, Kenna's job isn't like one you'd normally get in our world. As a spirit guide, she is tasked with helping troubled spirits who have found themselves unable to move on to the next life by quote-unquote clearing the world of corruption. But what exactly does this mean? Well, in the world of Kenna, most of the characters you meet are spirits, and these spirits come in all shapes and sizes. Some are cute, some look like kids. This is Saya and Benny, by the way, a pair of young sibling spirits who Kenna will likely encounter multiple times throughout her journey and grow a friendship with. They are described by Ember Lab as stealthy, trustworthy, and a little bit mischievous. And oh my god, why are they so cute? Getting back on track, some spirits are cute, Some look like kids, some try to kill you, and others are indistinguishable from humans. And even though some might look like normal humans, from what we can tell, there typically isn't a way to tell them apart. My guess is that their true nature will either be told directly through dialogue or by the way of context clues throughout the story. So back to Kenna's job. She helps spirits who have found themselves unable to move on from the world, possibly because of some emotional or mental trauma. These troubled spirits don't necessarily want to stay in this world, but they really don't have a choice. And here's the catch: while they might start off as normal spirits seemingly wandering the terrain like all others, the longer they stay in the world without finding peace, the bigger the chance is that they'll get corrupted. Take Taro, for example. He looks like a pretty chill dude and definitely isn't evil per se. He's just lingered too long in this world even though he doesn't belong. And this defiance of the natural order presumably started to manifest itself in the form of what Ember Lab calls dead zones, or regions of the game where corruption is high and troubled spirits linger. And it seems that staying too long in these corrupted zones as a troubled spirit might mean you lose way of who you once were. Taro, for instance, while probably a nice person, was unable to release the baggage that ties him to the natural world and eventually gets overtaken by a corruption of his own creation. And because of this, he becomes the Wood Knight, or a hostile manifestation of corruption who Kenna must first defeat to be able to reach Taro, who is still trapped inside. Kenna's job is to defeat the corruption shells housing troubled spirits like the Wood Knight and help the spirits move on once they're free. So all the bosses you've seen in the trailers are actually spirits who have become corrupted and must be freed in order to help them attempt to move on from the world. And now you're looking at yourself like, wow, this game is a lot deeper than I thought it would be. And yeah, that's exactly what I've been trying to tell you, and it gets even better honestly. Meet the Mask Maker, who is going to be a reoccurring character in Bridge of Spirits. Whenever someone passes away in the world of Kenna, the mask maker crafts a mask for them in their likeness. When that mask eventually decays, it means the associated spirit with the mask can move on to the next life. However, when a spirit is troubled, their mask stops decaying, indicating that they are unable to move on. And these are the masks that Kenna will have to use to be able to access areas of the game where said troubled spirits linger. This means that the mask maker might be the quote-unquote mission giver of the game and the person whom you constantly return to learn of newly troubled spirits. And in the ways of lore, that's pretty much all we know for the general and overarching story. But Ember Lab have teased plenty of details that don't necessarily add to the grander plot structure, but are certainly interesting. Things like the fact that there will be an ice biome in the game, or that a character named Adira will also be present, even though we know very little about either of those two pieces of information. But speaking of overarching story, let's talk about
I know you are kind. You sense the power that flows through this land. Yet, you do not fully understand it.
So now that you have a basic idea of what will be happening in the world of Kenna Bridge of Spirits, we can talk a little bit more about how you will be interacting with said world and traversing through it. Kenna Bridge of Spirits is described as a third-person action RPG where you'll obviously be playing as the main protagonist Kenna with a quote-unquote wide linear story progression. Now, what exactly does this mean? Well, if you've ever played God of War 2018, you could kind of think of it like that. This game will be mostly linear, but won't limit how you choose to interact with the world, do certain quests, or find collectibles. You can do these side quests, find collectibles, or explore the world in any way you want with near zero restriction, but you won't ever be able to deviate from the main story and natural progression. So let's say you want to explore Zone A, but it's locked behind a certain item that can only be obtained by progressing the main story. Well then first you'll have to do just that before entering, but once you do, you'll be completely free to traverse Zone A, plus all others you've unlocked up until that point. You can choose to progress the main story even further and potentially unlock more zones, or you could take some time off and take in the atmosphere and try to fully complete all a zone has to offer before moving on. It's really up to you, and that's what wide linear is. But speaking of level design, let's talk a little bit more about how these quote-unquote zones will work. Each zone, or each level as some people have opted to call them, is unlocked by clearing prior dead zones. And remember, dead zones are parts of the terrain that have particularly high corruption levels due to a particular spirit being trapped in our world, unable to move on. Once you are able to free said spirit and help them continue on to the next life, The corruption of a dead zone will wilt away, unlocking a newly traversable part of the terrain that Kenna may explore to find new collectibles, abilities, or side quests. Ember Lab has stated that each newly unlocked zone will provide a completely different feel to the one prior and bring all sorts of new exciting twists to the table. For instance, that ice biome I mentioned earlier is almost certainly one of the zones that we will unlock in the game, and will probably offer a distinctly different experience to all the forestation we've seen the trailers take place in. But interestingly enough, before you can clear a dead zone, each one will be modeled after the spirit that still lingers in it. So each dead zone won't necessarily look and play the same either, and we might see unique enemies and a potentially different personality, so to speak, to every dead zone we must clear. But now I see you shaking your head asking, but how do we help a spirit move on anyway? Well, in a demo shown exclusively to Game Informer earlier this year, in order for Kenna to help Taro move on, she had to first visit a shrine to obtain the Mask of Taro made by the Masked Man. And once Kenna does that, she will be granted access to Taro's dead zone, where she will then be tasked with finding 3 more items that were of significance to Taro while he was still alive. Those items being a lantern, a knife, and a container of food. And to find said items, Kenna will have to fight new enemies within the dead zone, some mini bosses, and possibly solve some puzzles and do some parkour. And once she finally obtains all she needs to be able to confront Taro, then and only then will Kenna be able to fight the Wood Knight that contains Taro and gain the opportunity to use these items to set his spirit free and help him move on. And Ember Lab has stated that despite the visual similarities, the bosses won't be nearly as difficult as the ones you'd find in Dark Souls, thank God, or Bloodborne. But imagine that, a game with a bunch of cute sprites potentially making me break my keyboard. Sounds a lot like Mario Kart. But the bosses definitely can provide even the most experienced players with a decent challenge if you turn up the difficulty. And all in all, that's pretty much how the structure of the game is laid out. So let's move on to one of my favorite parts of today's video.
Hi.
So the Rot are possibly the cutest little furballs you've ever seen in any video game, and they play a very massive role in Bridge of Spirits. The Rot are possibly the entities that Kenna will interact with most in the game, and kind of act like her right-hand man throughout her journey. They'll help her clear obstacles, get across bridges, and also assist her in combat. You'll meet the first Rot very early on in the game, and this little guy will act as the leader of all the future Rot you encounter and add to your team throughout your playthrough. He also acts as the little birdie on Kenna's shoulder, often giving Kenna advice and guiding her throughout her journey. However, each of the subsequent Rot Kenna obtains will be able to use a particular ability or add to the strength of Kenna's existing Rot abilities. Some of the abilities that have already been confirmed are Rot Carry, which grants your Rot the ability to group together and carry a heavy object that Kenna otherwise would not have been able to move herself. Presumably, the more Rot you acquire, the heavier the objects you'll be able to lift. There have also been hints that the Rot will be able to come together to temporarily mend a broken bridge so that Kenna may cross it. The next ability is Rot Courage, which allows the Rot to directly strengthen Kenna's abilities in combat. The way it works is that at the beginning of each battle, the Rot will actually be very timid and unwilling to fight. But as Kenna becomes more successful in battle, presumably by landing successive hits or dealing critical blows to enemies, the Rot will gain courage over time and strengthen Kenna's abilities to the degree of courage she's helped them gain. So to me, this sounds like the better you do in combat on your own, the more power the Rot will be able to give you through Rot Courage. And the final ability that we know of is called Rot Cloud, and this allows the Rot to become a swarm of flying furballs that can be used to clear physical corruption so that Kenna may access certain paths or perform certain attacks. You can actually see some footage of them doing an attack in this form on your screen. However, the Rot can only stay in cloud form for a short period of time before requiring a cooldown. And as a general rule of thumb, each Rot ability will get more powerful as you obtain more Rots, and the Rot you collect cannot die, not even in combat. Think of them as your little immortal spirit buddies who want to help you on your journey. And now you might be wondering, how many of the Rot can you collect? Well, there will be a total of 100 Rot in the game, each scattered throughout the world for you to find. But now, let's talk
Ground yourself. Feel the energy of the mountain. Draw on its power.
So Kenna is described as a very nimble and agile character. She can sprint, roll, double jump, and generally has no issue using movement in combat to her advantage. Her main weapon is a staff, which she uses to perform light, heavy, and charged attacks. She can link these attacks together to perform several different combos, but if things ever get too hairy up close, Kenna can always fall back and transform her staff into a bow, which is an ability she unlocks early on in the game. While her staff is in bow form, Kenna will have a limited amount of ammo, 4 arrows to be precise, with a considerable cooldown, so you must choose your shots wisely. Optimally, you'll be aiming for the weak spots on corrupted bodies so that she can stun her enemies and deal critical damage. And most times, these weak points can be exposed by using a rot ability to send them in to either deal damage or to distract the enemy so that you have a clearer shot. As my grade school teacher once said, teamwork makes the dream work. You should be warned, however, because Ember Lab has explicitly designed the game so that you can't just fall back 100% of the time and rely solely on your bow during combat. If you go in shooting all willy-nilly, that cooldown I mentioned earlier will come into play and you might find yourself stranded and without proper protection when you really need it. The game's enemies have also been hard-coded to rush Kenna if she has her bow out and aims for too long a time. So just make sure you're varying your combat and not being too timid when battling enemies. Of course, the Rock can strengthen nearly all aspects of Kenna's combat, and her bow is no different. Using Rock Courage, Kenna will be able to charge up her bow and take very powerful shots that could pierce multiple enemies in its path. The Rock can also obtain an ability so that each of Kenna's ranged attacks does splash damage onto nearby enemies, which I think is pretty cool. But let's talk about Kenna's pulse ability. So Kenna is no doubt a very gifted spirit guide, so she herself has an ability that hasn't officially been named yet, but looks very pulse-like in nature. It can help in both combat and also simply traversing the world. According to Ember Lab, the pulse allows you to get the world around you to react and give you clues, but is also directly connected to the shield ability Kenna has. During combat, Kenna can actually erect a shield around her that will have a separate life bar and provide her with protection. When this life bar runs out, however, Kenna will become vulnerable once again. This shield, just as mentioned, is directly tied to her pulse ability, which can even deal damage to enemies when also used in a fight. But I have a feeling that its most useful applications will be clearing growths of corruption, getting the game world around you to react, as well as parrying enemy attacks if timed extremely precisely, which I think is really cool and adds another layer of depth to the combat. All in all, super excited to see what the movement and combat system designed by Ember Lab brings to the table, and I can't wait to try it out. For now, let's move on to the So within Kenna Bridge of Spirits, there will be collectible hats that you can obtain for each of your 100 rod. So that means that there will obviously be 100 hats in the game, and they all look pretty cute from what we've seen in the gameplay. The hats are purely cosmetic and won't impact gameplay in any way. There are 2 ways you can obtain them. Number 1, by trading for them at hat stands with currency you found along your journey, or number 2, by simply discovering them in the world. Ember Lab has stated that while it is possible to simply trade for every hat in the game at hat stands, it would be a pretty difficult thing to do, as there is a set amount of currency littered throughout the world, and going down that avenue would require you to find every last piece of said currency in the game. Instead, what's recommended is that you also explore the world to find hats along the way so that you won't be hard pressed to buy each one at a hat stand. And in a world where EA and Activision exist, I think we'll all be very pleased to hear that Kenna Bridge of Spirits will have no microtransactions, so you can't actually sink any real money into the game. Once you buy it, you'll have all that it has to offer outside any expansion packs that may be released within the coming years, which is definitely a breath of fresh air in today's market. Oh, and sadly, as it stands, there will be no cosmetics for Kenna. Sad face. But now, let's ask ourselves, So from what I've gathered, the game will be a bit short and more focused on quality rather than unnecessary fluff. The founders of Ember Lab, brothers Mike and Josh Greer, have stated that when they first started developing Kena Bridges Spirits years ago, that they were very intimidated by those massive AAA 100-hour titles or even smaller 40-hour experiences. They knew they wanted to create something great with Kena, but those numbers could certainly be overwhelming to a studio comprising of only 14. Kena Bridge of Spirits is developed by Ember Lab, a 14-person independent studio based in Los Angeles. What? You're telling me 14 people made this? I should just quit, huh? So Ember Lab wanted to focus more on delivering a quality experience rather than pointlessly adding missions to their game or stretching their talent too thin, which I think we can all appreciate. And the fact that their core team is comprised of only 14 key people makes it all the more impressive that this game looks the way it does. Officially, Ember Lab has stated that the average gamer can comfortably finish this title over the course of a weekend, which leads me to believe that it's going to be about 8 to 12 hours in length for the main story, and possibly 12 to 18 hours if you wish to 100% the game, which still places it at a longer length than a AAA Call of Duty title, and that'll cost you $69.99. Kena, on the other hand, will only run for about $39.99. You heard me right, this game will cost you $39.99 regardless of the platform you get it on, which honestly makes it a crazy bargain, even if the game turns out to be only half of what it seems. It'll also be released on September 21st for PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and PC on the Epic Game Store. And now we come to the final topic of the video, the comparisons between the PS5 and PC versions of the game to the PS4 version of the game. Now, it's no surprise that the PS4 is definitely starting to show its age when running newer titles, and Kena Bridge of Spirits is not an exception. All the promotional material we've gotten for the game thus far has been running on the PS5, and we've yet to see any actual gameplay on the PS4. As of now, we have no idea how it'll look on that platform. So while I'm willing to bet that the PC version will look the same as the PS5, if not a little bit better, sadly the same can't be said for the PS4. It has been said that the PS4 version will have reduced vegetation and forestation on screen, as well as a limited number of rot that could appear at once. Obviously the PS5 and PC won't be limited in the same way, and we don't know if there will be other changes, if any, to the PS4 version to help it run a bit smoother. But don't worry, the story isn't all doom and gloom, as if you purchase the PS4 version of the game, you will be able to upgrade to the PS5 version for free if you happen to get your hands on the console anytime soon. So don't be afraid to get the game if you're on PS4, it won't cost you any more to play the upgraded version once you're able to. So with that being said, that is currently everything we know about Kena Bridge of Spirits and the details surrounding it. I am personally really excited for this game, and I hope learning everything that you did here today in a nice compact summary form has brought some anticipation to your side too. Now, I don't want to jinx it and say that this game will do great, because the last time I did that, well, Cyberpunk 2077 happened, and it seems like you guys won't ever let me live that down. But I do think Kena has some great potential. I'm not expecting this game to win Game of the Year, but if anything, it's definitely going to be a good taste of what Ember Lab is capable of and set them up tremendously for their next title if they decide to continue making games after their debut. I think if you have the spare cash, you should seriously consider looking more into it to see if it's for you. But that's gonna bring us to the end of the video, ladies and gents. Thanks for sticking with it this far in. I don't want to drag out this video any longer, so if you liked the video, leave a like. If you disliked it, dislike, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a future upload on the channel. Oh, and hit that bell notification button if you're so inclined. I've been Innocence, you've been the audience, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.